Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 12 Talk podcast. We're so excited about this episode. We've got a fantastic guest. You know him, we know him. He is huge in the Seahawks podcasting world, and he's one of our personal favorite podcasters. We have Mr. Dan Viens from the Seahawks Forever podcast with us. We're going to be talking the state of the Seahawks as they are. He just had a fantastic pod about how the roster looks better. So check that one out. We're talking draft strategy. We're going to talk first round draft grades. We're going to talk Dan's favorite Seahawks mock. And then if you have any questions, as we usually do, we'll go through them as we can. And then any of the big ones we'll save till the end. Mitch, you happy with that?
Absolutely. Can't wait to get stuck into this one.
For anyone who's a returning viewer, thank you so much. If you are new, we really appreciate you checking in on us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share. By sharing, you really help us out because we just get more and more people every single time we go live. And if you do like what we're doing, you can buy us a coffee, a beer, a pizza, a book, whatever. Buy me a coffee. It'll be in the link. And if you do want to talk more Hawks with us, we have a Discord channel. The king of the Discord is here with me, Mr. Mitch. We have people from all over the world who want to talk Seahawks, who are just loving being in that Discord. And I dip in every now and again just to sort of keep abreast of it. And there's some fantastic news and insights that come in. But as we're here, Mitch, should we hit the theme music?
Yeah.
Wow.
And there we have it.
I feel like I got to step up my intro game now.
Do you know what?
That was awesome.
The intro music is, and I'm going to go for nepotism again. My little brother is a DJ and producer called Slim Genix. I asked him for a theme tune and he sent it to me. I gave him the exact specs, sent it to me within an hour. And the intro video is what I like to call Josh is on garden leave from work and has far too much time on his hands, so he's going to redesign it all. So we've got new backdrops, we've got a new intro, an outro, everything. But Dan,
nice.
Welcome, man, and thank you so much for that. That's a great compliment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, you guys were so flattering in your introduction of me that I thought maybe you got your schedule mixed up and you thought someone else was joining you today. So I appreciate it a great deal. Yeah,
it's an absolute pleasure having you on. Like we said off air, Mitch and I are big fans. We listen to your podcast. We have it on. The notification bell's always set. It's something that I love to listen to, and I try and watch the videos whenever I can. And with all the time I've got at the moment, it's a great way for me to pass the time. And it's so insightful. So having you on here just to talk about the state of the Seahawks as they are at the moment, sort of what we think the draft strategy should be, the first round grades that we think they may have. And obviously, Dan, you've sent me yours, and Mitch and I've got our ideas. And then you've got us a mock, which we love a mock. It's mock draft season.
Oh, I mean, isn't it always? Really? But yeah, especially now, it's a problem. This time of year, I barely will go a day without doing a mock draft, at least one. You know, just playing around with different scenarios and as the big boards continue to update and as you learn more about players, you know, things shift. You'll find a guy that you like. That you liked a little better than you thought, or a guy you didn't know about, or you start to connect some of the dots, because this is when we start to hear some of the rumors too. And the Seahawks keep things buttoned up a little bit better than other organizations, but you start to get some, you know, you start to hear the buzz a little bit, and then I'll make mocks according to those things that I'm hearing.
Yeah. What's your favorite simulator at the moment?
That's a tough one, because there isn't a perfect one yet. And that's kind of frustrating. You know, I just last week discovered two more. I tried out the one from NFL Draft Buzz. Somebody turned me onto that. And then actually my favorite one at the moment might be the one that I just discovered. The guys reached out to me, wanted me to be a part of a live thing that they're doing. And it's called Walk the Mock. And I don't know if you guys have tried that yet, but there's two things I like about it. One is just the interface. It kind of has that old school ESPN draft day feel to it with the ticker running along the bottom. But also, and this has been a frustration for me over the years, even with, PFF, PFN, back when the Draft Network was a thing, where they don't incorporate the actual trade charts that are out there for anyone to use. And so the trade offers you get aren't realistic. And so you have to kind of do your own manual. You have to have another window open and go back and forth and do the math. But on Walk the Mock, when you pick up a trade partner, it shows all the picks they have, obviously, and you just check boxes and it does the math for you. I think it uses the old Jimmy Johnson chart, but at least it's something to go by. And so you can be more realistic in the trades that you propose. And so that's kind of one right now. But then I don't love their big board either. So trying to find the one with the right big board and the right features is kind of tough. Although I haven't played around with it yet. Another endorsement for the guys that Walk the Mock. You can import your own. If you want to take the time to set up your own big board, you can do that with them too. So that's kind of one I've been playing around with the most. Although the one I sent you today was Pro Football Network.
PFN,
is that free to use, or is that behind any paywalls or subscriptions?
It is. They bumped me up to a premium level because I'm doing a thing with them, and that's for $5 a month. You can get all the features unlocked. I'm not quite sure what is unavailable to you with the free account, but there is a free feature.
Lovely.
Well, Mitch, I think that's the one for our next mock. I mean, we did a mock on the last episode, and even though we were getting a lot of trade offers, some of them are ridiculous, like you said, Dan. So we try and counter to try and keep it as true as possible.
Yeah.
I for pure fantasy purposes, mock draft database. I love the interface. I just think it's really fun and easy, but it's so unrealistic at times.
It is, and that one doesn't give you any player profiles at all. That is one that I've always liked doing on my phone, just because, as you said, the interface looks great and it's really fast. But they haven't advanced it over the last couple of years. They haven't really upgraded. They were one of the first, but they're kind of behind the times now on the technology. So,
yeah, I mean, I think as we're talking mocks and whatnot, the big thing that we're sort of going to the moment. I mean, we've considering how we've come into this, we weren't supposed to start this pod until the season started, but with the big news that came with Mike Mack sort of joining as the head coach, we thought we had to jump in here because there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of people out there in the Twitter sphere and online, just Seahawks fan base that want to have their piece, and that's where we're trying to sort of bring it in, having people like yourself, having 12s. So anyone who's watching, if you do want to come on for a pod, just hit us up. This is a community podcast. That's what we're about. We want to try to get as many 12s in as possible from all over the world. We've had Germany, the UK, yourself in the US, the Latin Seahawkers as well. I'm going to shout them out as every single time. They all seem to be watching us, and we really appreciate that. Looking at the state of the Seahawks now, your last pod, and I'll say it again, I thought it was a fantastic piece where Mitch and I have said this, that the roster now seems to be more purpose-built to what Mike Mack's going to be running. Yeah. So Mitch has got a lot more insight on this than me. If you don't know, Dan, Mitch is our stats guy. He is the man who does all the in-depth. I do the pretty stuff and the talky stuff. Mitch is the pretty one with the fantastic beard and hair who does all of the geeky stuff. He loves a spreadsheet. So
only half of that was true, and it wasn't the pretty bit, to be honest.
But Mitch, I'll let you and sort of Dan chop this up for a little bit, just to sort of see where the conversations we've had about where the roster is, and then where Dan thinks as well. And obviously, we both listened to the pod for Dan, so go, dude.
Well, I'm going to kick it off just by saying that we named this pod Genesis, and obviously for everyone surely knows that Genesis is the first book in the Bible, and it's about the creation of, Earth and the stars and everything in it, and let there be light and all that. I did ask Josh if we could call it Genesis Let There Be Linebackers, but it was too many words and it looked a bit scruffy, so we just called it Genesis.
I do the pretty bit, so I looked at it and I wrote it in and went, it doesn't fit right. I'm really sorry, but you got it in there, so it's fine.
Yeah, but let there be linebackers.
Then they went out and got a couple linebackers, so it kind of threw a wrench in your plan too.
Absolutely, that bit was done. So yeah, I just wanted to talk really with you now about sort of some trends that are emerging, and there was a question actually that I posted on your X in a conversation. Maybe you've seen it, and Josh nipped in straight away and said, "Save that one for the pod. It needs to be on the pod."
Yeah.
And it was about the fact that we seem to have got two really good scheme fit linebackers towards the end of the towards the back end of the first week of free agency on fairly cap friendly deals. And I wondered whether you think that the kind of linebacker we're now looking at, are they slightly out of fashion? Are they a pretty niche build of linebacker? And do you think that if they are less favorable or less favored in the NFL at the moment, that maybe some good scheme fits in the draft will also fall to later rounds for us? What's your take on that?
I think you're onto something. And I mean, that position has evolved league wide anyway over the last, 5 or 6 years. I think, 5 years ago, it was kind of the edge group that was the most evolving group, where teams were using them differently and not necessarily defaulting to the big, the big 6'5", long 300-pound ends, and getting more athletic guys that can drop into space and be dual players, just as offenses continue to get more complex in the NFL. And I think now, as teams continue to try to figure out ways to slow down, the McVay tree, the Shanahan tree, what Mike McDaniel is doing in Miami, and even taking another step in the evolution of the linebacker position, which is we're seeing smaller, faster guys, because you have to be able to cover. It's not enough anymore to just be able to play the middle of the field and play moving forward and north-south and play the run. I mean, that's kind of, what we saw last year out of Bobby Wagner, and he can still do that at a high level, but teams would still take advantage of his declining, athletic ability in coverage, because I don't think it was the plan when they brought him back, but he ended up playing 97% of the snaps last year. He's an every down linebacker, and it'll be interesting to see what Dan Quinn does with him in Washington, because teams would pick on that. And so it's made it challenging for guys like us this offseason to try to identify where they were going to go with that position, because we don't know what they're looking for. We can kind of glean what Mike McDonald might want to do based on what we saw in Baltimore, obviously with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. And so that there was the assumption that we were going to go balls out for Queen in free agency, and that wasn't the case. And so as I look at this draft, a lot of analysts say it's not a good linebacker draft, but I don't think that matters. I think it's, I imagine from everything we're hearing from them and what we've seen from them, and the way that they went out and identified Dodson and Baker, is it's not about what everybody else thinks makes a good linebacker. It's about what Mike McDonald's looking for and how he wants to play coverages and play his scheme. And so I do think there are some guys in this draft that'll probably be available later rather than earlier, much to the chagrin of some fans anyway, that will be fits. And they might even be some guys that we're not even thinking about.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Tyrese Knight was a guy that had been scheduled for a visit, because that's a guy who's had 2 interceptions in the last 3 years from playing Will, but also has played interior for them. So you've got an off-ball linebacker as well as a guy who's rushed the edge too for them. It's 140 tackles last year, 4.5 sacks, and 16 tackles for a loss. That's an incredibly versatile profile for a linebacker, and also someone that's projected as a day 3 pick. So I looked at that, and I looked at who we'd got late in free agency, and it seemed to me that there's a pattern of the perfect fit for us not being flavor of the month with the majority of franchises, and perhaps that ties into not going, Jordan Brooks, Bobby Wagner, Patrick Queen for big money. There's plenty of big household names that went off the board real quick, and we waited, took the guys that were clearly good fits, and didn't pay too much for them. So I hope that continues, because value is always good.
Moneyball.
Yeah.
Moneyball. We said it in the last pod. Like, I think the way, and we've said, the way this roster is now shaping out is very much players that are able to do exactly what Mike Mack wants. Not you are this, but this position specifically. You've got linebackers who can shift. You're going to have safeties. I'm intrigued to see what he's going to do with someone like Colby Bryant.
Yeah,
very intelligent cornerback. They tried him at safety. I've said it previously. I don't think athletically he's quick enough to be able to be on the outside against some of these really athletic wide receivers. But I think having him there in that role of strong safety, free safety, cornerback, nickel, what's he going to be, is a fantastic choice. And then it's being rounded out more and more. And as we said on our last pod, it's Moneyball. It's not taking these premium players, paying them loads of money, really crippling your cap. It's taking value players or players that have got a perceived value within your structure within the team that have got cap-friendly deals, all the stats and intangibles that you want, and being able to integrate them. I'm really excited by this just to see how it shakes out, because it's a different way of doing it. And I think that's leaning towards how we're going to be set up for the future as well.
Yeah, and the Seahawks do things differently when it comes to managing their salary cap, and I'm sensing and hearing a lot of frustration from fans because of that. There's a piece that John Gilbert wrote on Field Goals a couple of years ago that he reminded me of, because we were having this conversation a couple of weeks ago through text. And excuse me, it's the typical salary cap management that we see around the league is teams tend to try to manipulate the length of the contract and make it a longer term deal, knowing full well that the player probably isn't going to be around to see the end of the deal. And so it's front loaded, or some teams do it the other way. It's back loaded so that there's an obvious out. We see it all the time. A guy signs a 5-year, $100 million deal, but then you see the nuts and bolts of it, and really it's a 2-year, $25 million deal. You know what I mean? Where they could
all the void years.
Yeah. And then there's that, which is even just, to me, that's just a big fat loophole that some teams use with the void years, and then some teams take that to the extreme. The New Orleans Saints, every single season, the Dallas Cowboys did this for years. The Rams got caught doing this a little bit. That it catches up to you at some point. You go all in, and you can backload all these deals and try to make a bunch of big splashy free agent signings or re-signings of your own, but it catches up to you. The way that the Seahawks do it is they pay the middle class more so than other teams around the league, where the teams that do what we were just talking about then tend to have to fill out the rest of the roster with rookies, and sometimes undrafted rookies or street free agents or veteran minimum deals. And so, you might have more stars, you might have more blue chip players, and that's what some fans want, but you pay for it in other ways. And Schneider has never preferred that route. He wants good, solid players at every position. And he does it this time of year so that he can go into the draft and let the draft fall to him. And so what that does, it puts more stress on your salary cap, all these 1-year deals. And we're seeing more of them this year than ever. And I think the reason for that is obvious. They just want to see what they have. And this year is going to be, they're trying to play it both ways, right? It's a year of evaluation, getting the right players for the coaches and figuring out what works and what doesn't, but they also want to win too. And so that's why, Jerome Baker, his cap hit is pretty significant, right? It's almost $7 million on a 1-year deal. Well, the cap dries up pretty quick when you're doing that. And it's almost gone now. They're going to have to make some other contract adjustments. And then where people are really starting to freak out is now they look at 2025 and there's no cap space next year either. But that's all a mirage. The point being that
don't say that. Mitch has got a bee in his bonnet about the cap being mythical. So
maybe mirage isn't the accurate word, but it's very easily manipulated, especially the way the Seahawks do it. They already know that there's moves that they're going to make in 2025 to easily free up $50-60 million the way that they did this year. So
I think this is it. It's rather than the cap being a mirage or mythical, it's all about if you're a good front office, you're going to already know what you're going to be doing a year or two in advance. You're going to be looking at, right, we're paying this player this much for this season. We've said we're going to pay them this much next season. What's going to happen if we cut them? Can we restructure them? Have we started those conversations with the agent already? And I think this is something that teams like the Saints have really dug themselves a hole with. But they end up paying players like Taysom Hill a ridiculous amount of money. But then Taysom Hill's value is that he can cover quarterback, running back, and tight end at a league-worthy level, let's say.
At least against the Seahawks.
I was just about to say that. He turns it on when he plays against us. And I'm not going to lie, I'm a fan of that, having that Swiss Army knife. He doesn't excel. He's not a world beater in everything or one thing, but he's just above average in everything he's asked to do, which is, if that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do. Pay him some money, then have some backups that are going to be, like you said, UDFAs or some rookies that are lower draft picks. Absolutely fine. I think with us, what Schneider's now allowed to do is he's able to look at this roster, look at the cap and say, right, how can we manipulate this to our means? How can, like this season, like I said, it's a build. This is a what's going to happen season, which is going to lead me onto a question we've just had off X as well. This is a what have we got? Who have we got? How will they fit? If we've got 1 year deals, will they want to come back if they play well, if they fit in this scheme? Who are we going to be going for next season? What's next season's free agency looking like?
Yeah.
And it's again, we've called this Genesis because it's a brand new start. It's exciting to be a Seahawks fan. It's for the first time in a long time. I'm not looking at the season going, what are we going to miss out on this time? What's going to be our deficiency? Is it our safety group? Are we not going to get the ball to the tight ends? Are we going to lack playing in the middle of the field so everyone just knows to try and, do man marking outside the numbers, all of our wide receivers? What's going to happen?
Yeah, change is scary for some people. It's why so much of the fan base wanted to hang on to Pete Carroll. Even though they could see with their own eyes and they just weren't admitting it to themselves that the performance of the team was declining on a year-to-year basis. And in my opinion, anyway, it was time for a change, and because I just didn't see that turning around, at least not on the defensive side of the ball. But change, I prefer to look at a little more optimistically. It's exciting. And specifically, I'm encouraged by how John Schneider in that front office has embraced the change and attacked it and went out. To me, the way that they handled that coaching search and ultimately ended up with the guy that they absolutely wanted and the guy that I think was the perfect fit, just showed me a lot. And all those concerns that some people might have had that Schneider was going to do things a little differently without Carroll around. I think we're seeing kind of the opposite of that he was a little bit more in charge than some people, chose to believe. But also that he's kind of been unencumbered now and sort of let loose and gets to spread his wings and he's having a heck of a time. I had an opportunity to visit with him at length a couple of days ago, and he told me exactly that. He said he's having a bunch of fun. He's really enjoying this entire process. And you can see it. Like, have we ever seen him smile the way that he smiles in those pictures where they're signing guys, or, the Mike McDonald press conference? Guy was beaming, like his face was red. He's having the time of his life. He's worked for this his entire career, and now he finally gets a chance to run full speed, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, good. He deserves it. I mean, I think he steered the ship admirably. I think having someone of Pete Carroll's stature is very difficult to work with because you can't really usurp his decisions. Mm-hmm. But this is now Schneider's ship to steer, and I'm looking forward to exactly how it goes. With what we've just said, the state of the roster, how everything's going to be changing. Question that we had from Scott on X: realistically, what can be seen as a successful season for the Seahawks in 2024? Dan, I'll hit you with this one first.
For me, it has absolutely nothing to do with win-loss record. Honestly, I've said before that this year is going to look, or it already does look, with the moves that we're talking about here, looks more like 2011 than 2013. Like that was the year where you could tell it was starting to gel. Like 2010, they made the playoffs at 7-9, and the Charlie Whitehurst throw against the Rams to get us in, and then Beastquake, and that was fun. But it wasn't, some of the pieces were in place. They made the move to get Lynch that year. but it was the next year with Tavares Jackson starting at quarterback where you could see Cam Chancellor, you could see KJ Wright, some of those early pieces and the way that the defense was playing were starting to come together. So at the end of that season, you know, we all went into that thinking, gosh, if they can just get a quarterback, this is starting to come together. And that's what I'm going to be gauging this year on. If at the end of the season, regardless of whether they win 4 games or 14 games, is it working? And can we see, you know, the style of play, you know, can we see the culture carry into the offseason to where now we have a better idea of how they want to play and what types of players they want, where the real weaknesses are and what we need to take that next step. And so in some ways that's freeing, but you know, there are fans out there who aren't going to accept that answer because they want to win, because they want to be able to pound their chest and go on Twitter and talk about how bad their team is and bad by, you know,
toxic Seahawks Twitter.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. It's my absolute favorite. I said it last week. I revel in toxic Seahawks Twitter. It's very, very rare that I'll put a negative Seahawks tweet out. I did for the Justin Fields thing, and you corrected me on that, and I held my hands up last week. I literally woke up, checked Twitter X, and went, "Oh no!" half asleep, wrote a tweet, and then got your reply, and then Mitch messaged me, and I went, I'll just wind that back in. I do apologize, everyone. Mitch, what's your definition of a successful season?
Yeah, I see it very much as a developmental year. I mean, you don't change every coach apart from one in the building and expect to be, you know, 10-7, 11-6. That's wildly over optimistic, I think. And if you look at how long it took the Baltimore Ravens to adapt to Mike Mack's defense in his first year there, it was about 8 or 9 games until it really started to look like it was working. And also with the whole style of defense being show one thing pre-snap, do a different thing post-snap, I can see all kinds of potential for busted coverages and small leads getting, you know, losing small leads late in games, you know, in a pretty hard to watch fashion. But I think it's all going to be part of a learning curve for a really young and talented secondary that we've got. And, you know, I see that happening. I'm not afraid of it. At the end of the day, this year will be all about progress and just being able to see, you know, flashes of, okay, this is working, or certain quarters of games thinking, hang on, that's the 49ers who haven't had a point this quarter, or, you know, moments like I want to see moments that we can work off with, you know, to build consistency. And that's what I want to see. I'm not needy. I'm not needing, you know, 10 wins this year. I just want to see clear progress and a continuation of what looks like a really concise plan with how we're building it. And I want to see that keep growing. That would be successful for me if we could really see growth.
And you kind of touched on something there too, that really, I think in large part, whether or not this year is considered successful, it might just come down to how well they match up against the Rams and 49ers, because that more than anything else, I think is what cost Pete Carroll his job. Is I think the front office looked at what was happening on the field and they saw that, you know, they're not gaining ground on the 49ers. And not only that, but the Rams were supposed to be bad last year, right? We looked at that defense and we said, it's Aaron Donald and 10 right? 10 other dudes. And they went out and won 10 games and you know, beat us to a playoff spot. There's got to be a step taken there. They have to gain ground on those two teams. Even if they can go, again, same concept. They can go 0-4 against those teams next year, but just show us that the style of play and that the way Mike McDonald coaches is going to have an opportunity to match up with those offenses a little bit better. And then maybe we'll still have to go out and get him a player or two to really make that jump. But that's going to be a big part of the evaluation.
Yeah. I mean, for me, sort of, it's the same as you two, but I've got some specific metrics that I want to look at. And some of them have been my big frustrations through the last few years. Some are sort of new with the evolution of what this team's going to be. Offensively, I want to see our running backs used in the right manner. I want to see Ken Walker being used as much as we can, because he should be a 1,000-yard rusher, but I don't want to see him trying to batter the ball through the A gap or B gap every single time. I want to be using people like Charbonnet to do that, because he is a battering ram. You know, when he absolutely dusted that player last year, I thought that's what you need. If he, when you vaporize someone like that, you want them running straight through the middle of someone. Marshawn Lynch said it. If you run through a person's face enough, they're not want to keep coming back, and that's what we want. We want to batter them down that way. I want to see people when Kenny McIntosh comes back. I want to see him use a running and receiving threat. I want to see our wide receivers' route trees evolving. I don't just want DK running a deep. I love him running, especially on a slant. I think over the middle of the field, he's such a weapon. He'll get you there.
Yeah.
Our tight ends, I'd love to see more usage from them, just so whoever we're playing doesn't know where that ball's going to go. We all know the offensive line. We want to make sure that Gino's actually got time to generate these plays. Defensively, the biggest thing I want, and I've said this ad nauseum, is I want, first of all, from a secondary, I want a secondary that people are scared to catch the ball near. Interceptions are awesome, but I want it to be every time a wide receiver catches the ball, they get hit with such force, like Witherspoon did it last season, and people stopped running towards him. I want every single player in that secondary to have that type of mentality, where as soon as a receiver, a tight end catches the ball, or a running back on the flat, they are going to get absolutely vaporized, and they don't want to catch that ball. If there's going to be one eye on the ball, one eye on who's coming at them from whatever angle. That sure tackling, because I cannot scream at my TV anymore for missed tackles. As an ex-rugby player and coach, it's something that is at the heart of what I love. And Lauren knows. Thank you, Lauren. Yes, just tackling. It's a fundamental of a contact sport, and it's something that we have lacked so much for so long.
Yeah.
But thanks for popping that up, Mitch. I wasn't even looking at the
I
chat.
knew it was coming. So it's great that they've commented as well. I love that.
Well, and just to piggyback off that too, it's they need to be better up front. I think that's going to be a huge focal point this year. We just can't get pushed around anymore, and we need to see that we can impose our will at times. When you have a 10-point lead in the second half, you have to be able to run the football and milk the clock and do things like that. Be able to run the football successfully when other teams are expecting you to run the football at times. And that was something that was lacking, I think, from Shane Waldron's offenses. And, we saw it. I can't remember the exact stat, but in much the same way that Mike Holmgren was known for on third and long, we would all look at each other in the stands and go, well, he's going to run a draw play. And, he would just give up on it. That was Shane Waldron on second and long. If they ever got stuffed on first down, second and 10, how many times did they run the football? But they couldn't do it. A good running football team could still get 4 or 5 yards there on a consistent basis, even if the other team has their, personnel on the field to defend against that. So we need to see them get better and more physical consistently up front, move some guys and on defense too. You have to be able to, pressure the quarterback without sending extra guys. The good teams in this league, and the 49ers are one of the best at it. You got to be able to pressure with 4.
Yeah,
that was my final point as well. So Dan, you've taken that word straight out of my mouth.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
That's it.
I was going to add one more thing in. I mentioned the trend with linebackers and the kind of linebackers we're going after, and how they're valued around the league. I wanted to mention one more thing. Another guy we've brought in, or we're bringing in for an interview, is Malachi Corey, and this is I think it's Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky, the Hilltopper. Yeah, that's it. You got it. And one thing he was renowned for is running behind screens, contact balance. Being put into positions where he's in open space and one person can't stop him and the yards have to catch and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when he's someone I knew quite well anyway, and I knew his profile and what he was good at. But when I saw that we brought him in for an interview, or we were bringing him in for an interview, I was a little surprised, because I don't think many people think we are lacking in talent in the wide receiver room. But actually the profile of that player is extremely similar to someone else that we did something unpredictable with this off season, which was D. Eskridge.
Yeah.
Not many people saw D. Eskridge getting reworked and being put into a prove it situation. It shows to me that the coaches on offense saw something in his game that they think they can use in a spread West Coast offense, which would make sense to me, at least, because you put the ball in the hands of someone that thrives in a one-on-one situation and can punish you with field vision and speed and explosive play potential. That's exactly the same situation you'd be drafting with Corey. So do you think that perhaps we've perceived that we need a player on offense of that ilk? And also, does that tie into Noah Fant being the tight end we brought back as well? Because that's another similar player profile. Do you see that as being something that they want to use?
Absolutely. And those are great examples of the kinds of clues that, we get this time of year that might indicate which way they're leaning in a certain. They absolutely, in my opinion, are planning on featuring Noah Fant more in this offense because they paid him as such. They weren't going to go out and give a tight end $10 million on the open market unless they felt like he was going to be a significant weapon. And the fans who say they overpaid him, he's not worth $10 million a year, are saying that based on his production the last 2 years, what he has done. Seahawks paid him that $21 million over 2 years on what they expect him to do moving forward. The D. Eskridge thing is interesting. I tweeted in early January that what if I told you that a new coaching staff might just unlock D. Eskridge? Right? Because that's how my brain thinks, because that's how coaches think, right? A new coaching staff doesn't take over and look at the roster and go, well, let's get rid of that guy. He hasn't done much. They're like, what can he be? And D. Eskridge, the athletic profile is you can't debate it, right? He's just been nicked up or suspended or just not used right. And so, I'm glad they did it, and they basically convinced him to just give up his guaranteed money is all they did. I mean, there's no risk at all. They basically were just telling him, they probably said something along the lines of, hey, we could cut you or you could do this. And he, I think rightly so, recognized that his best opportunity to see his ceiling as a player is to not go jumping around the league. Once you start that, sometimes it gets away from you. And so I'm excited about that. To your point, though, this is something that drives me absolutely crazy about sort of the fan mentality and when we talk about mock drafts today, I did it again. I almost always take a receiver at some point in the draft, and I'll get so much hate. We don't need a receiver. Okay, but we do. We always do, because we're going to next year and we're going to the year after. Like, your best receiver is going to carry your second biggest cap hit next season in the last year of his deal. Your second best receiver is on the wrong side of 30 and also has huge cap hits coming up the next 2 years. You have to plan for the future. And I absolutely guarantee with the new offensive coordinator, they're going to want as many weapons as possible. And just being okay with the four guys that you have, because a lot of fans include Bobo in that conversation too, is not enough. And also injuries happen. So you never, ever want to stop drafting receivers, because look how much it costs to pay them on the open market.
I was going to mention Derek Young there as well. He may well feel like an extra draft pick this year, because we obviously didn't see any of him last year through injury. It was a groin. Was it groin or hernia? Or, I think it was hernia.
I think it was a combination of the two. Yeah. And wouldn't it be fun if we could see the Derek Young that we saw at the end of his rookie season, when Waldron started using him in the backfield and doing some cool things with him as a fullback?
Yeah. A few years ago on a different pod, so I mentioned, when you look at the wide receiver group that we had, you had sort of your 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B. It was a clone of each receiver. So I attribute it very much Derek Young to a mini DK Metcalf. You look at the measurables of how they play, big physical wide receivers. And I think that's the way to sort of go on what you were saying. With a wide receiver, you draft every year because your game will keep evolving. You'll keep sort of wanting to just to test people, see how they can stretch the field. I think D. Eskridge, with the way the teams looked at him, he was a second-round draft pick. He's been dinged up. He had that suspension. If he hit the open market, he hasn't got enough tape for anyone at any organization to go, he's worth a shot. Unless you go all the way back to his college tape and go, he was brilliant. But in the league, he's caught one touchdown pass.
Yeah. But we see the flashes. I mean, there's a little bit of CJ Procise in him, because we just keep waiting and waiting and waiting on the breakout. I think he's going to have to prove it early this offseason. Because they're going to have to make some moves and clear some more cap space before they sign their draft picks. They're almost out of space now, and that would be one of the easiest ones. They're not going to. I don't think there's any kind of commitment in their minds. I'm talking about the coaches in the front office that they're going to give him the season to prove himself. He's going to need to prove himself in July and August and show them something, even to make the 53-man roster. So I think that's the challenge they presented to him.
He's going to have to be a legit OTA star. He's going to have to come in and wow them. If Ryan Grubb looks at him and goes, I can do so much with that skill set, then that's going to be his routine. Yeah. And obviously, with not having DJ Dallas as a kick returner now, that's another option for him. I think it's going to be very much down to what he does in, like you said, OTAs, the preseason, and then see what happens there. But we've talked about the Seahawks a lot as they stand. As it is silly season and it's mock draft season, should we get into some drafting talk?
Absolutely.
Yes. Now, for the first time on this pod, our draft talk is being presented by the UK Seahawkers. Now, I am a proud card-carrying member of the UK Seahawkers. I have the wristband. You can see all the stuff behind me as well. Mitch now is too. If anyone who's watching or listening would like to join, it's £12 membership. Obviously, it's got to be 12. And you get some amazing freebies with it as well. You get the social events, which I'll tell you about in a second. You get a discount at the Pro Shop when you are in Seattle. There's a chance to win field passes, and they're fantastic with them. The majority of the UK Seahawkers who do go to Seattle for a game tend to get a field pass. There's also competitions, which is I'll talk about in a second. And then you've got everything else. So this year, it was very much throwback. So I'd like to say thank you to Kieran, who designed the throwback patch. This one here, it's beautiful. It's going to be going on my throwback jacket that I have behind me. You have membership wristband, your card, and then this is a little, I think it's an RFA card. One of those cards that stops your other cards getting scanned. So if anyone's in London or anywhere like that and has that fear, it's there. It's always something cool and individual. And also, for anyone who joins before the 31st of March this year, you're going to be entered into a chance to win a Walter Jones signed photo. Which, let's face it, big Walt. That is a pretty cool prize there. And every year we try and have a meet up. The last one I went to was in Birmingham. It was absolutely fantastic just to chop it up with so many UK Seahawkers. This year we're in Newark-on-Trent, which I believe is towards the Midlands, Leicestershire. I should have really done my homework on that. But £5 per person. It's fantastic. If you are in the UK, you're any of our watchers or listeners there, get involved. Go on to the UK Seattle Seahawks fans page or the UK Seahawkers page on Facebook. They give you all the details there. You can join, chat to everyone, and by all means, feel free, mention us, have a listen to us. We are card-carrying members, and we'll be happy with that. But without further ado, not that one. We'll get onto this one shortly. But firstly, let's talk draft strategy this year. Mitch and I spoke about it. I know you spoke about it as well. A lot of other podcasters are. What is your preferred draft strategy for this year, Dan?
Trenches. Trenches. You have to get better up front on both sides of the ball. And again, it's, fans fall in love with the name on the back of the jersey. And, you can look at our defensive line group, for example, and feel pretty good about it right now. But absolutely do not stop adding to it because, like I said earlier, injuries happen. You want to rotate those guys and keep them fresh anyway. I always remind people that Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill were not starters on our Super Bowl championship team. They were rotational players. you have to have more of those guys. And it takes sometimes those defensive linemen. We saw it with Jalen Carter last year. You know, he showed flashes, played well as a rookie, but those guys don't really put it all together until year 2 and year 3. Sometimes guys like Christian Wilkins, and it takes them a while. And so, you know, just continue adding to that group, because you have to be able to stop the run. You have to be able to get after the passer. And then we have to continue to invest on the offensive line. And I think Schneider's comments about guards being often overdrafted and overpaid were misconstrued 2 weeks ago. I think they were overblown a little bit. I think people took that to mean, well, he's not going to draft guards early then. I don't think that's necessarily the case at all. But also, you don't have to draft them early. Just continue to invest and, you know, have as much competition up there as possible, so that your roster is always set up for long-term success. Because you mentioned it earlier, you know, those front offices, they map out the next 3 or 4 years. They have grids. They have, you know, boards all over their office walls where they're looking at, okay, 25, 26, and how do we look then? And that I do too. You know, I did a mock draft earlier this year where I took Byron Murphy in the first round at 16, and this one dude, one of my favorite Twitter followers, he came after me like, why would you draft a guy who's not going to start for you? And I tried to debate him on it, and I just finally gave up because I wasn't going to convince him that that's not the point. So for me, I'm going big guys and early and often. Not specifically. I also need to at least get one young linebacker that we know is going to be on a 4-year rookie contract, you know, that we can look forward to growing into the future with. Ideally, I would get 2 of them, but at least one there, and then, you know, focus on both lines.
I like it. Mitch, go on. You are our draft expert here. So for anyone who is new to listening, and thank you very much for tuning in, Mitch very much is the man for our draft. He does a lot of the analytics, the research. He's the man who feeds me over our WhatsApp and our Discord all the, Josh, you're going to love this guy, because as was alluded to by Lauren earlier, if you're a sure tackler in defense, I'm going to love you. And Mitch knows this. So every single time there's one that comes out, he's like, Josh, just check this out. I'm like, okay, fine. Mitch, go on. Your preferred draft strategy.
Yeah, so I like what we've done over the last 2 drafts, and I've been saying a lot on our pod, you know, we don't really do positional need on, you know, first 2 days, and we address that later on, and we bring in people we've seen at the Senior Bowl, guys who've been on interviews, guy we've spoken to at the Combine, in, you know, on day 3, and we're likely to just take best player available on day 1 and 2. Now that's just behavioral observations, but then John came out and pretty much said exactly that on the John Schneider show this week, right? That's what I linked you, I think, Josh. He said exactly that. So that kind of reinforced that. However, the other thing that John Schneider is famous for is being very quick to jump out of the first round or trade back in the first round. So for me, my favorite strategy would be to try and trade back from our 16 and pick as many times as possible on day 1 and 2, even if it means giving up a day 3 pick in order to, you know, move around the board a bit more, but get as many picks in the top 100 as possible and reinforce the trenches. Very much like you said, Dan. Picking up someone like Cooper Beebe in round 2 would be brilliant. His dad likes to, you know, rate my mocks on X and comment on my mocks.
providing his son's in there. Yeah.
Yeah, if his son. Every time I've picked Cooper Beebe, Tom Beebe has been all over my X commenting on the mocks. So despite him probably wanting his son to go to Kansas, as all of his sons, apart from one, has played for Kansas, and he himself had played for Kansas, somehow he likes the idea of his son Cooper going to the Seahawks. But yeah, just lots of picks on day 1 and 2. Focusing on trenches for me is exactly what I'd love to see, and then some positional needs ticked off on late on day 2 or day 3. That would be my favorite sort of look.
Yeah, just put this question up from Card Craze, one of our new subscribers on YouTube. Thank you very much. Would John Schneider trade down for more picks this draft season? I'm very much a fan of trading down at 16. I see, as John said, best player available. We'll go to our projected sort of first round draft grades shortly. But I think there's still value if you trade further back in the first, maybe picking up a second, even if you package that with some of our later picks and maybe move up the board a little bit more and sort of navigate around it there. I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. I don't really think there's anyone that I would class as blue chip game changer at 16. And I think moving down, you could probably get someone who's around about the exact same level. But that's just me. So,
yeah, I think when he made the Sam Howell trade, knowing he was moving out of the third round with our native pick and moving, out of the fifth round, so we have 2 4s and 2 6s now. I think he did that feeling pretty good about the prospects of being able to recoup some of those picks by moving down, and anytime that this subject comes up, someone's quick to say, well, it takes 2 to tango. It might be hard for them to move down this year. And I disagree, because I think they're sitting in a good spot. 16 is typically a ballpark number of about what teams usually hand out as far as first round grades go. And this year we've heard some teams have less than that. And so if there's a player that a team still has on their board as a first round grade, 16 might kind of be that ledge where, okay, we're going to need to get up there to get that player. So I think the Seahawks will be in a good position there. And plus, we're going to get this run on quarterbacks. It seems almost certain now. And then some other positions are going to start going after that. I think it's going to leave some value at 16, not only for us if we stick and pick, but in the eyes of other potential suitors who would want to move it up to that pick as well. And John knows this league as well as anyone. He has great contacts. He's a great communicator, a great relationship builder. And just as he's known for knowing the league in the sense of who's going to take which players, how risky would it be to move up or down. He also absolutely has had conversations with teams who are interested in moving up. And so I think he feels pretty good about the prospect of doing that. And he feels pretty good about Sam Howell too. I mean, there was value to be had there too. But moving down like he did with those 2 picks, I think he's pretty confident that he'll be able to recoup some of those.
I think whilst we're talking first round draft grades, we have a little chat about what we think are the Seahawks projected first round grades. Now, Dan's got his as well. Mitch has, I'll hand this over to you, my friend. But we've given the top players here who everyone sort of knows the names by now. Everyone's mocked them at some point to the Seahawks, barring sort of Williams, May, Daniels, Harrison, the wide receivers, basically. But first round draft grades, I'll throw it over to you, Dan. Who would you give them to?
Of the guys on that chart, I mean, those guys are all, those are all first rounders for sure. What I kind of did when I was putting together some notes to get ready to come on with you guys today is I left off players that I didn't think we had any shot at. Like, to me, I kind of put a list together of players that I think we could realistically see at 16 or later and who fit and who I would like to see us draft. And it's a pretty long list. You've got Newton. You don't have Murphy on your list. Murphy's a guy, and you're going to see it in my mock draft. Little spoiler alert there. Byron Murphy's one of my guys. He's one of my favorite guys in this entire draft. I just think his athleticism at 6'1", 300, he's compact, but he is so strong in his lower half. And you put on the tape of him against Alabama last year and watch, even with Devondre Sweat next to him on that defensive line, Alabama was double teaming Murphy a lot. And the way he can take on double teams, just with his strength and his ability to get low and win reps, even if he's not making the tackle, is really impressive to me. So I'd put him there with Newton. Newton's a little more explosive player, probably profiles a little bit more as a guy that's going to get to the quarterback. And then that offensive tackle group is really enticing. Those guys are all on my list, especially obviously Fautanu, who's he's not from Seattle, but he played right over there, University of Washington, not too far away from where I sit.
Not your team.
Yeah, not my team. I'm a Coug, but I sure as heck would like to see him. There's a bunch of Huskies, actually, I'd like to see on the Seahawks. And then those edge guys, again, this is one of those positions where whenever I suggest an edge, I always get a little pushback. Like, we're pretty stacked there, especially with Nwosu coming back, and then a lot of people will point to the fact that they extended or signed Daryl Taylor to a 1 year. I do that all the time. By the way, that shows how old I am.
I do it with an eye roll. I just say Daryl Taylor.
I call him Daryl Turner all the time.
Yes.
Let's just think about the rookie year with Daryl Turner and nothing else.
Taylor.
But Daryl Taylor.
We'll get there. So.
Yeah. Although I see the Daryl Taylor thing as very similar to the Dwayne Eskridge situation. They basically gave him a 1 year deal with, I think $20,000 in guaranteed money. Correct. If he makes the team, he's on the roster, he makes $3.5 million or whatever. I think Daryl Taylor's going to have to prove himself. He's going to have to make the team, and also might be a trade chip on day 3 as well, as that edge group runs out. And so I think if one of those guys falls to them, that could be a really, really enticing pick, especially someone like a Chop Robinson, who continues to fall in these mock drafts. And I don't really get it, other than he wasn't that productive in the stat sheet at Penn State. But you see the pressure rate and you see the athletic profile. There's some really enticing guys there on that edge group too.
Yeah, I think edge, very much like wide receiver, you can't have too many.
Nope.
Because it's very situational as well. So you could have, let's take Levi Bell, for example, who I believe is still on a practice squad.
Yeah.
Thought he was signed to a deal. I loved him in the preseason, but he has got that right mix of power to speed to power. For me, he's a bull rusher. He's got fantastic pad height. He's going to get through people, but that is situational. If you're going to then need other players in that edge group who are speed, who have bend, you've got Taylor who's bend. If you've then got, and Mitch and I have spoken about this in previous pods, players who are going to, with the disguises that Mike Mack's going to be throwing into this defense, who are going to show us a blitzer, but then have to come back into coverage. You're going to have to keep mixing it up. It's going to be very difficult as well, having someone who's pure edge, because when Daryl Taylor gets on the field, every team looks at it and goes, "You're rushing the passer."
Yeah.
He's never dropping back, and if he does, it's not going to look pretty. I think the edge for me, I've mentioned it before, as a rugby player, Liatu Latu, I'm still desperate trying to find out what happened with his neck injury. So Dan, if you know anything, feed me that information.
No, just that he started out here at UW and then retired medically because of that neck issue.
They retired him, didn't they? And then when he moved, they went, "Yeah, you can play, it's fine."
Yeah, right. But he sure. I haven't read or heard how his medicals went at the combine, but I don't think there's any concern. Some of those guys that, once you get a medical red flag sort of knock hanging over your head, it's hard to shake that. It's still attached to Penix. People still talk about him like he's a brittle old man. It's Peyton Wilson. There's still concerns, about knee injury he had 3 years ago, and some people think that's going to push him down the board.
Reason DK fell because of his neck.
Yeah. Once you put a couple of good years on tape, to me, I think that all goes away unless you have something chronic, degenerative, something along those lines that pops up in a medical. But
Lucas Neal,
yeah.
That's,
what we should talk about that though, because whenever I look at the first round, I have to think about the offensive line situation. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when I do these mocks, I do them in a way so that I'm covering myself in the event that Abe Lucas can never play football again to the level that we saw from him his rookie year. And so I'll take a Graham Barton, or one of these guys that can play guard or tackle, or Fautano obviously is an obvious choice, just in case, And again, I think too much was made of Schneider's comments about the guard position, because then he also said, and you touched on this a little bit, that yes, in the first couple of rounds, they go best player available no matter what. But then he said later in his answer that they incorporate positional need into their grade. And I don't think enough people took that part of the comment to heart. They just took the part about best player available early, and then we draft for need later, and they ran with it. So absolutely, some of these guards that we don't think they're going to take are going to be graded higher because there's a positional need on the roster.
Yeah. I mean, I think, before we get into your mock, who else did you have as a sort of graded sort of a first round grade for us? Who are your tops?
Yeah, other guys that I would take, I think Darius Robinson is starting to get a lot of buzz. I know Rob Staten put him in his mock draft the other day, and this is something. Shout out to a couple other Englishmen, Staten, and then Matty Brown, who, as soon as Mike McDonald was hired, one of the first things that I recall him tweeting was that he actually thought the personnel that we had on defense on the roster fit really well with what McDonald has traditionally done, except we need a little more size on the edge, and edge can mean outside linebacker or it can mean that 3-4 defensive end. You know, some people still refer to Leonard Williams as a defensive tackle. I kind of see him as a defensive end. It'll be interesting to see how he's used, but Darius Robinson's, 6'4", almost 300 pounds, 295 pounds. Not a twitchy, not like a, Latu from UCLA, not really a dynamic, twitchy pass rusher, but a guy who's really, really strong, can set the edge, has a lot of length and power, and he's a different profile and body type than what we have on the roster currently. Whereas, Dallas Turner, Chop Robinson, Latu, those guys are kind of redundant with what we have. And then the other guy, let me see if you have him on your list. Yeah, of course you do. I don't think he'll even last till 16, although sometimes I see him getting pushed down. But Jared Verse is a guy that I think would match that role as well, who's not as big as Robinson, but big, physical, two-way player, can stuff the run and also get after the passer, just a relentless guy. So, and then Brock Bowers is fascinating, obviously, because, again, I think if he's there at 16, a lot of people like to say, just take him. He's the best tight end in the draft. I have questions about his ability to block and play inline with that frame. And again, we just paid all that money to Noah Fant, presumably to feature him. I think that positional need part of the grade that Schneider was talking about would knock Bowers down a little bit. I just don't see that being a fit. I wouldn't feel great about our first pick this year being a tight end.
Yeah. Agreed. 100%.
On Darius Robinson, I'm just going to add in before we sort of go too far off him. One of the things I like the most about Darius Robinson for us is the fact that he's playing at the level he's at now without ever playing football in high school. So he has a humongous disadvantage going into the draft of only having such a small sample size to judge him on, and having had such a small time frame to really learn his craft and hone it to the level where people are putting him in the category of a day one, day two pick in the NFL draft. That's an insanely steep learning curve that he has aced. So if you're going to put him in a system where he needs to learn to diversify his skill set and be super versatile, you've got to put a lot of faith in a guy that has done that in such a small time frame. It shows a really coachable project, I think.
Yeah, and plus the fact that his first 3 years at Missouri, I think he played defensive tackle. He played inside, and then they moved him to the edge and had him stand up more this year. And so he's got that versatility, which Seahawks traditionally under Carroll always loved. Guys that could play inside and out. And I think McDonald has shown some of that too. He loves to talk about interchangeability and just presenting options so that the offense doesn't really know what you're doing. And then I guess, and I haven't dug in deep yet to player interviews to get a sense for whether they're Seahawk types or not. I'll do that in April. But in Staten's piece the other day, he talked about how this guy absolutely, kind of like Derek Hall last year, where you can see his personality, his profile, just absolutely being a Seahawk. So
future captain of the Seahawks.
Yeah. He's on the radar for sure.
Leadership and competitiveness ooze from his pores, and that's Seahawks traits 101, really. So
Mitch, our first round grades we'll leave to a separate pod, because I really, really, really want to get to Dan's mock.
Sure.
You want to mock my mock?
No, we're not going to mock it. Usually we'll do one sort of with you, so you can do one, we'll do one, and we can discuss it. But I just want to discuss yours, to be honest.
All right.
So here we go, Dan. Talk us through what's happened, where the trades have happened, who you've taken, and why. Everyone wants to know.
Yeah, so a couple of disclaimers right off the top. I always do trades so that they match up on the trade chart, so they are realistic. But everything about going through this exercise this far out from the draft is about what if, right? Working scenarios. And in this case, typically my favorite go-to trade down is with Green Bay at 25 because they have a bunch of extra picks and they have or had the youngest roster in the league last year, and yet were a very good football team and made the playoffs. And so I think they're going to be hunting more dynamic players, more quality over quantity in this year's draft. They don't want to just add, more youth to that roster. I think they want to start, kind of sprinkling in. They can take shots a little bit more. They can be more aggressive. And so them moving up, not just in the first round, but in the third round also, they have 2 picks within a 10-pick span behind us there too. So if we don't deal with them in the first round, they could be someone that John calls in the third round, certainly. But and then sometimes I'll move down again. I'll do multiple moves, but just for the sake of doing this one, this is with Kansas City Chiefs, obviously at 32. And it was a way to stay in the first round, have a day 1 pick and that 5th year option, but also pick up an extra second and extra third. So you see 64 and 95 there. Those are the last pick in the second and third round also. Now, I'll say this. I don't think Kansas City's making that trade, even though it matches up almost to the point. They do need to get some guys on rookie contracts on their roster because they need to manage that salary cap. They're one of those teams that pays blue chip players. So I don't see this trade as happening, but it was just a scenario I wanted to run. It still allowed me to stay in the first round.
I like it.
So one question actually that did come up from Jonas, who was a guest on the pod. So German Seahawker, he did actually ask linebacker question. One Germany. Guten Tag, Jonas. Wilson, Trotter, Colson, or somebody else entirely? Well, Dan has answered that question for you with his mock here. He's gone Peyton Wilson. I loved Peyton Wilson's work out of the combine. I was so... I was in awe of it a little bit. Me and Mitch watched it together. We had a live on our Discord where we were talking about sort of what was happening, and he blew me away. His pure athleticism was off the charts. I mean, we were talking about the knee injuries.
Right.
What knee injury? You couldn't tell.
I mean, absolutely. And another disclaimer too. A lot of times in these mocks, like they're just unrealistic by nature. Byron Murphy's not lasting till 32. I don't think Peyton Wilson's lasting till 64. It's I never get to take Peyton Wilson in a mock because he always falls in between the end of the first round and he's sometime early on day 2 usually. The names he lists there are all good ones. I mean, Junior Colson's a fan favorite, obviously with the connection. He played his true freshman year for Mike McDonald at see, I just aged myself again, you guys. Throwing a Mike McCormick reference on the pod.
It's okay. No one heard. No one heard, Dan. It's fine.
Probably a lot of your listeners or viewers don't even know who the hell that is anyway. So former head coach and GM of the Seahawks, by the way, you guys look that up if you don't know who he is. But Mike McDonald, has familiar with Colson and Jay Harbaugh is too. And he's just such an athletic freak, one of the youngest players in the draft. I think he just turned 21. That's enticing to me. And so, yeah, I take usually one of those guys. I'll tell you who I'm not high on though. I know the stat sheet looks great, but when I watch Edgerrin Cooper's tape, I don't know. I just don't see a butt kicker. I don't see a guy who likes to come up and stick his nose in things. And a guy like Peyton Wilson kind of reminds me of Drew Sanders last year, a guy that I really, really liked who ended up going to Denver, where he's sort of a hybrid. I mean, he's so tall, 6'4", 233, runs a 4.4. You can play him on the edge. He can cover. He never gives up on a play. You'll see him making tackles 20 yards downfield. Really, really enticing player that I think Mike McDonald could do a lot with. just kind of uses a Swiss Army knife. And then I told you how I feel about Murphy too, as my first round pick. I mean, him at 32 would be a steal all day long. I'm sprinting to the, that card to the podium.
I was just going to add in that I think Peyton Wilson's most common NFL comp is Luke Kuechly from the Panthers.
So it's a comp, potential.
It's a heavy comparison, but
yeah,
it's a do-it-all guy with X factor play sort of upside who can just blow up things and win you a game. That's very Peyton Wilson. He's splashy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now he's probably a weak side linebacker, and one of the goals I have when I usually do these mocks is I want to find an obvious Mike, a long-term Mike. I didn't in this draft, but Wilson was just too good to pass up.
I'm happy with that. And then at 81, you went Jaden Hicks. You've got your Coug.
Yeah, and if it's either him at 81 or Brennan Jackson later on. Right? I gotta take one of the Cougs. But no, even if irregardless of where Jaden Hicks played college football, I think he's one of the top 2 or 3 safeties in this draft. I like him better than Tyler Nubin, who many considered to be the best safety in the draft, although we're probably not going to see a first round safety this year. But I like Hicks better. His athletic profile is better. He's a really explosive athlete. He's tall and long, 6'2", 211. He's one of those guys that Mike Macdonald has had success with, kind of moving around. He could play in the box. He's a physical player, but he's an outstanding cover guy as well. So you can play him at strong or free. You can play him in the slot, that big slot that Macdonald likes to use and is kind of the in vogue around the league right now. And I think he's a guy too that just there's a lot of untapped potential there. He was a transfer into WSU in his final season, and then decided to declare early. So I think there's still a lot of upside there too. I would be ecstatic to get Jaden Hicks at 81.
I'll say that. And then 95, we've got Mason McCormick, the guard from South Dakota State.
Yeah, got to take a guard somewhere, right? And this is kind of that range where they talk about the value really is for guards. And McCormick was a guy that, this is what I love about the combine every year, is I always will discover some prospects and then go watch them. McCormick's certainly that dude. And what's interesting about him is it's hard to find tape of South Dakota State, but when you do, and I ended up being able to
imagine being in the UK trying to find it. Yeah.
I have a database I subscribe to, and it took them a while, but they finally got one game up, and it's kind of grainy. It looks like, I don't know, maybe his dad shot it on Super 8 from the stands, handheld, but 6'4", 310, 34-inch arms. But when you watch him on tape, he looks kind of stiff, and it's deceiving though. He wears like he reminds me of a throwback offensive lineman. Like his shoulder pads are bigger, and he kind of looks like he's lumbering. But then he goes to the combine, and he blows it up athletically. One of the best athletic testers at the combine at the guard position. The thing that I think is going to appeal to the Seahawks about him is he's a 3-time captain, big time leader, and started 57 straight games for South Dakota State. So lots and lots of experience. Needs a little bit of refinement just because of the level of play, but don't let the tape deceive you, because he did a 36-inch vertical jump at the combine. The dude's got some explosion to him. So I think that'd be good value at 95.
There you go. And the best ability is availability. Said it
indeed.
Many times. 102 is someone that Mitch and I have mocked. And if you don't mind, because I think I've got his name down pat now.
Go for it.
Kieran Amagaji, the offensive tackle from Yale. Is that how you say it as well, Dan?
Yeah. I didn't actually, seek out proper pronunciation, but I think that's pretty close.
Do you know? It's taken me weeks. Every time Mitch and I have done a mock, it gets to his name, and I've become so stuck that I've watched so much tape and listened to every interview and pronunciation, and I've settled on Amagaji, and that is how it is now. So
I would just call him the kid from Yale.
Yeah, that'll do too.
That big kid from Yale. Yeah, I'll take him in the 4th round.
Yeah,
he's an athletic freak. You know, he's long. He's got 36-inch arms, 6'5", 323. He's obviously raw coming from that level of competition, but he really moves well. He's really smooth. And I think taking a tackle that you think has starter traits at some point in this draft makes all the sense in the world, whether or not Abe Lucas comes back or not, because Stone Forsythe is going to be in the last year of his deal. You signed George Fant to a 2-year deal, but it's probably just a 1-year deal the way it's structured. And, it'd be a really good situation to have a young tackle, to plug him in and let him learn, because the upside there is pretty spectacular athletically.
Agree wholeheartedly. And then 118, finally gone tight end.
Yeah, and this is something that, after the moves they made in free agency, I don't think tight end's a priority. I actually like Brady Russell as well, who they poached off the Eagles practice squad at the beginning of last season. He's got some upside in the passing game, and he's your de facto third tight end right now. And then Tyler Mabry is just going to be a Seahawk forever on the practice squad, I think. So you've
sure he lives at the VMAC now. I think they've just got him an apartment somewhere.
Yeah. Rent, don't buy, but also go ahead and sign a long-term lease. It's fine. And the Seahawks always bring in multiple undrafted guys too. And I think this class, some of those names that we're seeing being drafted are going to fall out of the draft as well. But Stover's kind of that tier 2. He's not going to be up there with Bowers, or a lot of people think Sanders from Texas is kind of right there with him. But Stover, to me, is the best two-way tight end in this draft. Outstanding blocker. In fact, I think he started his career. He's a former defensive lineman. So he's not afraid to mix it up and be physical. But also was a little faster and a little more athletic at the combine than people were expecting. Ran a 4.65 at 6'4", 247. So I think he would just be just an ideal kind of two-way sort of John Carlson-ish tight end to add to that room.
That Cade Stover, someone that I've mocked a few times. And Mitch has got some darlings when it comes to the tight end position. Mitch, how do you feel about the Cade Stover?
Yeah, I like it. He's a really good weapon, and he projects as quite a rounded skill set kind of guy. And I think when you look at our tight end room, we've got out and out weapon, and with Farrah Brown, we've now got out and out sort of run block sort of.
Mm-hmm.
He's not there to be your flashy guy. So someone that fits right in between the two, I can see being a really good piece to add into that room. So I like it from that side. And I also really liked the interview that was done with him prior to the combine, where they showed him on his family's farm. I don't know if any of you saw that.
I did not. No.
Always got farmer strength.
Yeah, exactly. It spoke to that sort of country toughness, throwing around hay bales and wrangling cattle, and I just really liked that from a tight end perspective, because being able to wrangle cattle, it's a fine balance of finesse and skill and brute strength and hardiness, and that for me is a tight end, and I really like that. I like the way they tied that together in the interview.
See, that's a key scouting note, because you know who else has a farming background, who owned and operated his own farm for years? It was Ryan Grubb.
There you go.
See,
that'll be an interesting farming. That's not really a conversation I want to be part of if he does get drafted, because I would have to walk out.
But that's going to be part of their conversation, right?
Yeah, I love best friends.
What's your favorite?
So let's the last three here as well. Obviously, we're going to the back end of the draft now. Run us through these.
So Josh Cephas, UTSA, Reek Woolen's going to know him well. They were teammates 3 years ago there at Texas San Antonio. 6'3", 185. He's a lean build, but again, as we mentioned earlier, you got to draft wide receivers every year. You just have to keep rotating those guys in, and if they don't make your 53, you can always get them to the practice squad and develop them. But this guy was just uber productive. Played 5 years at UTSA, 4 as a starter, and his most of this was compiled in the last 3 seasons. But his 4-year stat line: 305 catches, 3,486 yards. So that's 11.4 yards per catch. 27 touchdowns. He makes contested catches, and then you see him break away as well. Just a really productive player, and that's what you're looking for in the 5th round. You want traits, and this kid has some traits, but you want production as well. Steel Chambers was just kind of, sometimes when I do these mocks, I may not love the player at that pick, but at the end of the 6th round, I'm more so just checking a box, right? And this would be the range where I would want that second linebacker. As I mentioned earlier, 2 guys. I'd love to have 2 guys on rookie contracts in that linebacker room, so we can get out of this cycle of signing 1-year short-term guys. He's a smaller. He looks a lot more like sort of the modern trend of what a weak side linebacker looks. He's 6'1", 220, former running back, so he's not afraid to hit as well. But he's got some good coverage ability, more of a coverage guy, not a 3-down guy, but someone who's going to excel on special teams and be able to cover. And then Braden McGregor is one of my favorite kind of unsung dark horses in this entire draft. Obviously played at Michigan, so McDonald knows him well. Not one of the bigger name guys, although he finished his career with a flourish. In his last 5 games, he had 3.5 sacks and was really stood out in that national championship game against Washington. I was surprised to see that he measured with 33, just over 33-inch arms at 6'5", 257, because on tape, it reminded me of the first time I ever saw Max Crosby at Eastern Michigan. Mm-hmm. Like, it looks like his arms go down to his ankles. And just really, really long, and one of those guys that just has a nonstop motor, plays with his hair on fire. What he lacks in refined pass rush moves, he makes up for just with pure effort. And I'm always looking to add an edge later in this draft. Sometimes, I wasn't joking earlier, sometimes it is Brendan Jackson out of WSU, because I think he has a similar profile. But I think McGregor is a guy that it seems like his arrow's pointing up a little bit. He might not be available at 235.
I like that. With Steel Chambers, for me, well, if we go Cephas first, for me, like I said, it's production. When you get him that far down the draft, production and traits, fantastic. If you've got traits, but then you can also show the production, fantastic. Steel Chambers, everything you mentioned, but then he's also got the pedigree of being an Ohio State guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to get some good coaching anyway. Braden McGregor is actually someone that I've not scouted personally. Mitch, I don't know if you have, but that's someone I'm going to have to look into now.
He's featured in my my draft database, but he's not someone that's got all of my attention. So it's quite nice to you shining a spotlight on him. I'll definitely add a bit more depth now into him on my database because of that spotlight. But yeah, no, nothing much to add there. Just Steel Chambers is one of my favorite name guys in the draft.
100%.
And
that's an all-name team there, isn't it?
There's 2 guys coming up next year, I think. Pig Cage and Notable Factor next year.
What a name!
So yeah,
if Steel Chambers doesn't make it as an NFL football player, he can for sure be in like a B-grade action movie.
That's B movie action hero all day, isn't it? I mean, with that, that is kind of it for the mock. I really like that. That was a very different take on the mocks that we tend to do. And thank you so much, Dan. I'd like to say thank you very much for coming on 12 Talk.
Absolutely.
It's been amazing. I mean, we usually try and keep these sort of around the hour mark, but it was just such a good conversation with you. I couldn't sort of try and nudge us forward. Tell everyone who's watching and listening. I'm going to take a lot of people that are watching and listening probably know exactly where to find you, but if they don't, tell us where to find you and what you've got coming up.
Seahawks Forever is the name of the show. It's a YouTube channel and on all the audio podcasts as well. What do I have coming up? I have a really cool show planned for tomorrow. A gentleman named Keith Simons, who reached out to me and sent me a link to his podcast about a month ago. And he's a guy who has a fascinating history, and I can't wait to talk to him. He's a quarterback guru. He, even to this day, he still works with young quarterbacks and coaches them and mentors them. But earlier in his career, he was a head coach in college football and an offensive coordinator, and spent many years doing that. And he has connections and ties. He's interviewed Dave Craig and Jim Zorn on his show. And so we're going to dig into kind of the history of Seahawks quarterbacks, which is always a little bit of a scary proposition at times, but also a lot of fun.
Peaks and troughs there.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And talk about some of his favorite guys over the years, and some stories that he has to share, and then we're going to dig into this draft class a little bit. And I've asked him to kind of give me his thoughts on some of the later round guys that I think, even after the acquisition of Sam Howell, who we hardly even talked about, like I'm really, really high on, and I think that was made with an eye towards the future. I think it takes us out of the quarterback discussion early, but I certainly think later in the draft. In fact, usually with that pick 235, I'm taking a quarterback. See if he has any guys that have stood out to him, and get his thoughts on Sam Howell and Geno Smith. So we're gonna talk about so many different quarterback related subjects that I think it might be one that I'll chop into a couple of different parts to post on the podcast. So that's coming up starting tomorrow. Part one at least will be tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to that. Well, that's going to come up on my notifications as well. To anyone who's new to this pod, please don't forget to like it, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well. It's fantastic. It allows us then to reach out to people like Dan and anyone else, if you're a 12 who does want to come on and just talk Seahawks with us. That's what we're here for. We're a community podcast. Before we do leave, we had a couple of questions that I just wanted to get to. One by Jay Digber. Do we have any comp picks? We don't have any this year, but I believe we have 3 or 4 next year.
It looks like it, yeah. And I think that's a game that they used to play really heavily, like and with purpose, and they just haven't in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think it's a goal again to keep these, and the signings that we've seen, even the last couple of signings last week with a couple of guys they added at the end of free agency aren't going to knock those comp picks out of the formula. So we should get some extra picks next year, which would be nice.
Excellent. And then the last question we have here is from Richard Blake. I've seen a lot of draft analysts projecting Jackson Powers Johnson to us at 16. What do you think of Olu having a fair crack at the starting position? I want to see him have that chance. I'm a fan of having Olu there. I think in his first season, when he was thrust into that position, he did an admirable job. I think when you look at his body of work at Michigan, he was an award-winning center who knew exactly what he was doing. I think he's a great communicator who moves really well. I think he is going to be our starting center this year. I don't know what the gentleman on either side of me think.
100%. I think it's gotten lost in the discussion a little bit. There are a lot of fans who will tell me that we need a center, and I will tell them that they're wrong, because
you just have to do we've got one. We've got a center at home. Yeah.
I think he was drafted with an eye on being a long-term answer at that position. I don't think I saw anything from him in his opportunities last year to change my mind about that. I think, he may not be, a Jason Kelsey type that's going to get all pro honors, but he's a 10-year starter in the league is what I believe. And I think the team feels that way about him too, because I think that's why Nick Harris was the choice instead of Evan Brown as that backup swing center guard. Nick Harris isn't being brought in here to compete with Oluwatimi for the starting job. He's being brought in, I believe, strictly as a backup. I think Olu is one of the mainstays of that offensive line until he proves otherwise, which I don't think he will.
Yeah, and I think JPJ, we could take him at 16. I think he's more of a candidate if we trade back to the back end of the first round, and JPJ has played guard in college. So if we were to do that, I would see that as someone that can back up Olu this year, or if Olu goes down, it's a perfect slot in there as well. He would add versatility as well as star quality on that line. But as I said, not for me at 16. I think if you're picking at 16 and you're going offensive line, Fuaga if he's dropped, Fotonu if he's still there, there are better options. Or Fashanu if Olu Fashanu was to fall to 16, that's a run to the podium as well. So I very much doubt we'd reach on him at 16. But if we trade back, brilliant upgrade and versatile option. I
feel the same way. JPJ has become a fan favorite in mocks, but I don't see it as a fit because I look at the opportunity costs there, right? If you're going to take anytime I take a guard, unless it's just someone that I feel strongly enough about where I'll figure it out, like Faotanu, that then when you get so I took Byron Murphy in the first round, right? The combination of first round guard and then interior defensive lineman in the third, I never liked that combo as well as taking the tackle early, because there's a bigger ledge and I can still get value at guard in the third, like I got here with McCormick, and sometimes BB even falls into the third round. And there's some other guys there as well. So it's opportunity cost. If you take that center / guard, even if you plan to play him at guard, you're really scrambling to find role players basically later on in the draft on the defensive line.
Agreed. I mean, and with that, thank you to everyone who has joined us, who's asked their questions, who's watching on YouTube, X, Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, X, Facebook. It's usually at 12 Talk Pod. Make sure, as I said before, like, subscribe, follow this man as well, Dan Viens. He's one of our favorite podcasters. We're so lucky to have him on. Dan, thank you so much for
this was a great time. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Dude, but we'll do it again at some point as well, like 100%.
Well, we got to do it the other way too. I'll have to have you guys come this way.
I'll do, but we'll be 100% up for that.
Good.
But from us, I'm just going to say, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Awesome. Till next time. Bye.